Let's get started. The purpose of this video series is to introduce an individualized education plan. This video will go through each page of the individualized education plan and help you understand each page. It will also tell you which parts you are responsible for editing before a meeting. An individualized education plan, commonly called a PPT, is a document that identifies a student's eligibility for special services in a school environment. Any student who has been identified as needing special services must have a 504 plan or an individualized education plan in order to get additional help or accommodations in school. All students in a high-road environment will have an individualized education plan. A typical individualized education plan has 25 to 30 pages, depending on how many goals have been written for the student. It is important to remember that an individualized education plan is a legal document. Everything written on that document holds you as the member of that team to fulfilling the paperwork. If there are disagreements or frustrations from any member of the team, for example, the parents, they can take it to court. This is called due process. If you take this process seriously, then things will go smoothly. This is page 1 of the individualized education plan. This page is important to you because it tells you important information about the student. For instance, at the top it will tell you the student's full name, their birthday, their home district, and the last time the team met. When we say the words PPT, it means Planning and Placement Team. That is a specific term to Connecticut. These meetings might be called something different in another state. Other important information would include the student's address and their guardian. That is important because many of our students do not always live with their birth parents. Each special education teacher at High Road is also considered the internal case manager for the student. This means that you should particularly know the next evaluation date, which is the next triennial, and the next annual date, which is usually the next meeting. You should also know where to find the primary disability. These are pages 2 and 3. Page 2 on the left is the minutes page. As the case manager, you will not have much to do with writing on this page. The district representative is in charge of making sure it is completed. This page will be important if there were any decisions made at the meeting that need follow through. For example, this meeting asked that the mother seeks out help from a service provider. The social worker and teacher will want to help the mother follow through with seeking help. If it is not done by the next meeting, then it will reflect poorly on your team. Page 3 is a legal document that indicates the district notified all members of this team of the meeting. Unless the parent waives the notice, a district must give 5 days notice before holding a meeting. The present levels of performance page is where the overall picture is shown of a student. This is where a teacher will go to first, to understand the strengths and weaknesses of a student. In a later chapter of your training you will learn more about writing a present level. The teacher is responsible for writing in the academic portions for language arts, math, and non-academic areas. If you work with any student 15 years old or above, you would need to work with the transition coordinator to write employment and transition present levels. The social workers are in charge of filling out the behavioral, social, and emotional present levels. If a student has additional services, such as speech or occupational therapy, those service providers need to fill in the information. However, as the teacher and case manager for the individualized education plan, you need to communicate with those service providers to ensure they are filling in the information. If left blank, it will reflect badly on you, not on the service provider. Each present level written ties to a goal later on page 7. Each present level is written in the same format: an overall picture, strengths, weaknesses, and finally, the impact of the student's disability on their access to curriculum. Keep in mind that if you identify a weakness, and it is reflected in the weaknesses area, you must write a goal to address it. Page 6 is specifically of interest to special education teachers working with students who are age 15 and above. This is typically those in grade 9, However, sometimes it can be for students in grade 8, depending on whether or not they were held back at any point during their educational career. This page simply indicates whether planning is appropriate and how you are going to guide this student. For example, some students will work towards a 4-year college. Others may be working towards a job. Different paths require different goals and testing. Here is where that journey begins. This is a blank goal page, also known as page 7. A student can have anywhere from one goal page to several. It depends on how many needs the student has. The type of goals a student can have are listed at the top. They are academic cognitive goals, behavioral goals, communication goals, gross fine motor goals, post-secondary goals, self-help goals, employment goals, and independent living goals. As a teacher, you will be in charge of writing the academic and non-academic areas, as well as the transition and employment goals if relevant. It is not a coincidence that you are responsible for the same areas in the goals that you are responsible for in the present levels. This page also includes how you are going to measure the goal. This means that a year from now, you will be able to have data that tells for sure whether or not the student has met the goal. This is why it is very important you set up goal tracking. On the right-hand side of the page are boxes that help service providers identify how a student is performing along the way. These marks are implemented quarterly, usually in line with the report cards. Something that often confuses providers that are new to the process is the way pages are numbered. Every goal page is numbered page 7. However, you can have multiple page 7s. For instance, if a student has 5 goals, then you will see a separate notation at the bottom of the page telling you which goal page you are working on. Calling the goals pages, page 7, indicates that it is the 7th element in the individualized education plan rather than the actual number of pages in the document. Hopefully this clears up some confusion. There's another, separate training for you that discusses how to write measurable goals and objectives. The Program Accommodations and Modifications page, also commonly referred to as page 8, gives an overview of any changes a student might need in order to be a successful student. These changes might include any special textbooks, such as large print or color-coded text. It also will identify any organizational strategies you might use to help a student, or side contracts that helps a student learn a new behavioral strategy. Here is where you evaluate what you know helps a student and put it in writing. If something a student needs is not listed here, legally they cannot access it. Sometimes, things like iPads and specialized equipment are listed here, which require the district to pay for those items. Make sure this page is very reflective of your student. This page also lists if a student has a one-to-one. Make sure you check this page as you begin to program in your classroom for a new student. Page 9 is a page that lists the state testing. In Connecticut, this is where the SBAC and CAP science testing is listed. All students grades 3 through 8 and grades 10 and 11 are required to participate in state testing. Sometimes, students take modified testing, which will be listed here. Depending on a student's cognitive ability, they will be exempt from the full test. Instead, they will take a test called the checklist. This test is based on basic skills, rather than the more advanced knowledge that is expected of normally achieving students. If you are the school's test coordinator, this particular page will be very important starting in January of every year. If you are a teacher, be prepared to identify your students' needs. Often, those needs are already listed on page 8. Page 10 is one of the pages that is often overlooked, but is actually quite crucial, especially in an outplacement facility such as High Road. Special factors indicate whether or not a student has a behavioral intervention plan. At High Road, a behavior intervention plan has been developed that is called Statement of Behavioral Supports. That statement should be made available to the district and parent at each meeting, especially at a placement team meeting. Progress reporting becomes a crucial element every quarter. Typically, The tracking months on the goal page 7 are in line with the report card months. These are October, January, April, and June. If you do not check that those are correct, you will have a huge headache on your hands when you attempt to fill in the months. This is something you should check on the draft. If they are not in line, be sure to let the district representative know so they can change them. The exit criteria is typically not something you would deal with at an outplacement facility. For most of our students, the exit criteria will remain the same throughout the duration of services. That exit criteria is the ability to succeed in the regular education environment without supports. Again, you will rarely have to worry about this section. Page 11, commonly referred to as the hours page, indicates how many hours of special education a student receives. This includes academic hours, social work hours, speech hours, occupational therapy hours, physical therapy hours, and in some cases, transition service hours. This page also reflects if a student has summer school or extended school year hours. Usually, the district representative will take care of the hours page, but there are some districts that expect it done. It is always best to be able to fix the hours page if you need to. The way the hours page works is basically like a simple math problem. At High Road, each school day is 6 hours long. We have 5 days on the average school week. 5 times 6 is 30. Therefore, the total number of school hours is 30. Since our school is entirely special education, all students have 30 special education hours. Those hours are then divided into the services provided. Typically, High Road recommends that students receive 1 hour of social work services a week. That hour is divided between individual and group services. If a student only has academic and social work hours, then the student has 29 academic hours and 1 social work hour weekly. Those hours are reflected in the grid on the top of the page. When you put the hours in, don't forget to tie the hours to goals you are working on during those hours. Also, you need to fill in the responsible staff and implementers. You also would then add in the start and end dates. Services start 15 days from the date of the Individualized Education Plan. The end date is 1 year from the date of the meeting. EAP hours are updated at every PPT. Knowing how to update them is an important skill to learn. This has been an overview of an individualized education plan. You should now be familiar with all the pages of an IEP, as well as your responsibilities as case manager. Whether you are a teacher, social worker, or a transition coordinator, your familiarity with this process will allow you to be a confident service provider. Your job is to make sure that the document is fully complete before you come to the meeting. Besides the document, you are also responsible for creating reports, which are covered in a different presentation. Sometimes, there are not drafts open on IP Direct, the online program that we use to write the Individualized Education Plan documents. Sometimes, the district will not share the document in a timely manner. However, it is your responsibility to know when you have upcoming meetings, and to let your director know if something is not available to you. Completing paperwork is never a desired part of a special educator's job, but it can be seen as a celebration of all the hard work that you have put into your student. It is the High Road recommendation that you start planning for annuals and triennials at least a month before they are due. To complete your training on Individualized Education Plan and Planning and Placement Team Management, please go on to the next training titled, Preparing to Write an Individualized Education Plan.